so welcome everybody. This is a continuation, really and truly, of our very grand literary conference held in September this year, the first Trinidad and Tobago Literary Conference that showed to us without any doubt at all that the literary scene in Trinidad and Tobago is one of the most booming in the Caribbean, if not internationally. Building on that, a very excellent team of postgraduate students has decided to take the thing forward and keep it rolling. This is the first in hopefully a series of such ventures, which has selected very carefully from amongst the people who participated in the literary conference to continue to highlight in small bite-sized pieces across time until we come to the next conference some of the things that we want to keep going. This particular one, the Christmas Extravaganza, is meant to show off on the spot as far as possible our creativity in the moment, so that people were asked very simply to submit their compositions on Christmas in a time of COVID and what the whole experience means to them. We have a very nice lineup, and those of you who have registered and who have been following what we are doing would already be familiar with it. And then I'll introduce you to the hosts for this evening. This is followed by Divya Sukhdev, who will be doing a poem to open the entire show. And then we have our featured presenter this evening, Janelle Frontin, who was one of the biggest stars of our conference in September. We break the mood a little bit to have a cultural item, a song, and then this will be followed by Paula Ube, who was also a part of our open house session during the September conference, and she's going to be doing some poems. The mood shifts again to a cultural item, a monologue, and then Shanice Bihari presents her story. This will be followed by my own attempt to what I have dared to call a story, and thankfully being sandwiched between Shanice and Darren Sandy, who comes immediately after me with one of his dynamic spoken word compositions, should shield me a little bit. So Darren, thank you for being right behind in the program lineup. This will be followed by a song, and the evening closes with a poem by our hosts, Daniel Skinner and Suan Rajbansi. So your hosts for this evening are, as I said, two members of a very dynamic team which has been working since the conference, since long before the conference. There are years' work to put that, if not more, to put the conference together. And the team, some members have been on the team throughout, some members joined later, but everybody did yeoman service. And two of them are here this evening to host the extravaganza. Danielle Skinner is the Guild of Students postgraduate representative for the Faculty of Humanities and Education 2020-21. She's an MA Literatures in English student, and she has the dream of becoming a Shakespearean expert. Swan Rajbansi has a BA in Literature and History and MA in Literatures in English, and she's currently pursuing her PhD in Literatures in English with a focus on post-colonial fiction. She has been an educator for the past 18 years at the secondary level, and she has served as examiner for the secondary entrance exam assessment and as assistant chief for communication studies for many, many years. Apart from internal departmental presentations of her research, she has also presented at the AICMSE 2018 Oxford Conference and Bridging Worlds Conference at the University of the West Indies. So I hand you over now to Suan and Daniel to host our extravaganza this evening. All yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raj. Welcome, everyone. We are indeed happy to have all of you here. We are starting off this evening with a presentation from Ms. Divya Sukhdev. Divya is currently pursuing a PhD in Literatures in English at the University of the West Indies. Her interests include speculative fiction, which comprises the genres fantasy, science fiction, and horror. So Divya, take it away. You have the floor right now with your poem.
Good evening. Thank you, Suan. So I will be sharing with you my poem entitled Trini Christmas. We have no snow, but what you really want that for? To freeze from your head to your big toe? No. Trini Christmas will warm you to your core. We light so pretty and bright, people that slow down or stop the car to Maku. And if you miss it shining in the moonlight, your cocky eye for so. The food is some of the best around. Punch creme, ginger beer, pastel, ham, black cake, and sorrel. A better spread cannot be found. No fete complete without some parang, and I don't mean shiny parang, wang wang wang. And when you bring out the rum, even people who bad talk you does come. This year we have a virus going around. It's so bad it's sinking you lower than the ground. But Trini Christmas can still lift your spirits high and give you something to hold on to till the virus waves goodbye. Thank you for listening. Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much, Divya. That's a wonderful piece. It's a great way to get started. And
And
now
I
I'd like
love
to,
your hat too,
yeah,
Divya.
awesome, awesome, awesome. So, Danielle, I think the floor is yours. Can you introduce our feature presenter?
Of course, next is one of my personal favorites, Miss Janelle Fontaine. She's an award winning author of the Yara Sister trilogy. She is a content creator and the founder and CEO of Mark Made Group Limited, a Caribbean based company specializing in entertainment and the arts with the sole purpose to enable adapt humans and choice projects to make their mark on the world. Actively involved in various fields, from engineering to creative industries, she is a Renaissance woman who holds a BSc with honors in electrical and computer engineering and a master's with distinction in project management. So the floor is yours, our feature presenter, Ms. Janelle Fontaine.
Oh, thank you, Danielle. Thank you to all of you. It's a pleasure to be back. Today, I'm actually going to be sharing a story that came to me this year shortly after the conference that we had with you guys. And I spoke about what it was like to not be a writer of cultural works. And I mean, I've even spoken to various other authors saying, when would God send me something that is local and cultural in nature? And it so happened that within a short space of time, this little story came just as I was staring out of a window. And I felt it was such a perfect story for 2020 and for Christmas, and just to give some encouragement. It's based in Trinidad and Tobago in the deep south, and it's a little bit of folklore. So whether you believe it or not, it's up to you. And it's called Rainbow and the Rain. So I hope you bear with me as I am also for the first time attempting to publicly voice act in 4 different voices. And this is going to be interesting for all of us, I think. Okay. Rainbow jumped at the crack of thunder that pierced the peaceful day, rousing her from a much needed afternoon nap. Because of the sheltered imprisonment they implied, she wasn't a fan of gloomy days, not unlike any other wild and spirited 8-year-old in her village. She pushed off the bed, rushed out of her room, and then pelted down the stairs, only to fly straight into her mother. Where exactly you think you're going, wild child? Sandra grabbed her daughter's arm just as Rainbow tried to duck under the basket full of clothes hastily plucked from their drying lines. But mommy, Rainbow protested, you said as soon as my nap was done, I could go back out and play. Only if the sun's still out, Sundra retorted. Don't act like you didn't know this already. In fact, I need some help folding the clothes, so come. Rainbow's face fell lower than the 10th hell. She groaned, but her mother ignored her and turned to the stairs. Rainbow followed her. She knew better than to get on Cindra's bad side. Still, a little backchat wouldn't hurt. What's the real difference between taking a shower and bathing in the rain, mommy? And to have to bathe soon anyway? Why could only go outside in the sun? The sun does burn, you know. Her mother didn't even bother to respond. Instead, she shook her head with a chuckle, waiting for what always came next, just as they passed Rainbow's room. All you put me in a tiny box with no windows. A box, and then expect me not to want to go outside all the time. And today is Sunday. When next I go play, Lord? Her mother muttered something that was rendered inaudible by the pounding rain on the galvanized roof. As they entered her grandmother's room, Rainbow ran to the rocking chair her granny sat upon, staring out of the window, and then began her second round of complaints. Granny, why does have to wait for the sun to go outside? Like mommy don't know when we in these parts of it's only rain, and more rain from Port of Spain. Her grandmother, Satya, let out an uninhibited cackle, and Sindra rolled her eyes. Between the two of them, Sindra had her hands full of wild woman. So Sundra said, only when there is sun you could go outside, little one? Satya grinned, grabbing Rainbow into her lap and giving her a strong squeeze. Well, I don't know about you, but unless my eyes are finally going bad, isn't that sun out there? Rainbow whipped her head around and screamed in delight. Despite the pounding rain, brilliant sunshine filled the entire backyard. Satya didn't need to say another word, and there was not a single one that Sindra could say, though she still tried. Rainbow was already out of the room and down the stairs and hooting as she peeled into the yard, splashing in every puddle under that blazing sun. Sindra glared at her mother, but stifled a laugh when Rainbow shouted for them both to come. There's no way we're doing that, Sindra yelled through the window. Speak for yourself, Satya replied, pushing up from her chair. Even though I don't see why you won't come, you already wet. Sindra's look of confusion turned to rage when Satya grabbed her cup of water from the windowsill and flung its contents straight into her face. Satya screamed with laughter and quickly shuffled out of the door. Sindra let out a flood of curses behind her. Still, after Satya had joined Rainbow in the yard, only 5 minutes passed before Sindra gave in and came down. She cautiously stayed under the porch's roof at first, warning them whenever either came too close to a rock or a tree or a hole that could twist their ankles if they slipped on the mud. After a few laborious stares from both Satya and Rainbow, however, she put away her mothering and let her rarely seen inner child out. It was glorious. 3 generations of Trinidadian women from the deep south acting the age of the youngest one among them. Sindra was sure she could see Ravi and David peeking over the fence, and with flushed cheeks she called out, "But all your fast, mind your business." It didn't take too long for child Sindra to recede and Mommy Sindra to take back the wheel. Come now, can't have the three of we catching cold. Plus, you know what they just say when the sun's shining with rain? I don't need to be out here when the devil beating you wife. I thought is when monkey married and this does happen, right, Granny? Rainbow shot a glare at her mother, who was shooing her back to the porch. Her grandmother stood frozen in the sun shower, hands outstretched as the sun became wholly engulfed by the rain clouds. She smiled and whistled a strange song, and Sindra, recognizing it, bowed her head and looked away. You are both wrong, Satya smiled, reminiscing, and then turned, winked at Sindra, and followed them into the wooden house. Rainbow was not letting that wink or comment slide. Wrong, Granny. But that's what my teacher from school say. You saying Miss Paula wrong? Oh God, oi, what else she must be wrong about then? Maybe all that maths she teaching. Sindra didn't miss a beat with her swift cloud to Rainbow's head. Girl, I hope you finish Miss Paula homework because I'm not going in there to defend no slack child. Oh God, mommy, yes, I did it yesterday. Satya muffled her laugh, knowing Rainbow hadn't looked at her school bag since she pelted it into the corner of the living room after she burst through the door last Friday afternoon with all of her school tales. Granny, I waiting to hear. Sindra and Satya exchanged a strange look, and Sindra reluctantly nodded. Rainbow folded her arms. I don't like all of this secret code you all have. I'm not troubled. What's going on? Satya smiled and patted Rainbow's wet hair. Go and bathe and change, and when you come down for evening tea, I will tell you a new story. Rainbow's eyes widened so much they looked like they could burst out of their sockets with excitement. She loved it when her grandmother told her stories. They were always from a time before she was alive, and everything was different. Without another word, she took off to bathe. 10 minutes hadn't passed before Rainbow rushed back down the stairs. Nah, Rain, I have no way you bathe properly. Sandra grabbed her ears and Rainbow howled in pain. I show you I wash behind them stinkers. Oh God, mommy, I clean, Rainbow screamed. Sandra kissed her teeth and went upstairs to bathe. So you aren't going to let me go and bathe and dry my skin at all, are you, little one? Satya teased. You always say how you don't ever get sick. Plus, look how you done dry off already. Satya laughed at a scandalous volume as Rainbow jumped from foot to foot. Okay, come, sit. Squealing, Rainbow settled herself in front of her grandmother's feet and even grabbed a jar of Vaseline so she could rub them. These were her favorite times, and it made sense. Her granny was her most favorite person in the entire world. Okay, child, what I'm about to tell you is a very, very big secret, so you can't go telling Tasha first thing tomorrow. You know how your mouth like to run. No, Granny, never. I have never broken a promise or told a secret. When her grandmother pursed her lips, Rainbow continued, well, not with you, never with you. With another chuckle from Satya and a little shifting around, they both got comfortably settled. Well, you know that in some places there is snow and in others there is no rain and only deserts. Yes, Granny, Miss calls them climates. Exactly, Satya exclaimed. But what your miss wouldn't know is that there are powerful spirits who control the climate in every country and region in the world. Rainbow's eyes widened. Like gods? She whispered. No, Satya laughed. Not gods. There is only one God, remember? But God assigns managers to take places and care for them for him, just like how Tanti Nisha has Julie run the shop when she goes to the city. Except these managers have power and they report to God. Like angels? Rainbow interrupted again. Let your granny tell the story, not child, Sindra laughed as she came down the stairs. I don't know how you does have patience with this one, no? Rainbow stuck out her tongue at her mother, who playfully jumped next to her and tickled her until she squealed. After a little more shifting so they could all be comfortable, wrapped in a few blankets that Sindra had brought from the linen cabinet, Satya continued her tale. They are known by many names in many cultures around the world. Some saw these spirits as simply folklore, stories we told little children for entertainment, like fairy maids or mermaids and even far-off nymphs. But I call them the sky folk. Satya smiled, a haze passing over her eyes. Sindra clasped her hand over Rainbow's mouth just in time to stop another spirited outburst, and this time Rainbow didn't protest. She knew she could get a little carried away at times. Plus, Granny always made time for questions after the story. Satya gave Sindra an appreciative look. For every country and region and place that has a different climate, there is a special spirit from the skyfolk assigned to control, maintain, and change it as God commands. Skyfolk were under strict instructions and they were quite serious about their responsibilities. From time before time itself, they performed their duties with such diligence that people forgot they even existed. While they lived for 1,000 years, because only God is immortal, humans had shorter lives, so they hardly noticed when regions were handed over from one spirit to another. Humans got used to their weathers and seasons, marking the periods when things would change and planting or reaping accordingly. They migrated to more favorable places without even knowing at times that it was the skyfolk's job to help them do that so that the lands of the world would be populated and so that people from all races would meet each other. The skyfolk became the silent hands that were mentioned less and less in the oral passing down of history, so they never made it into the written works of recorded history. So how you know about it then, Granny? Rainbow couldn't help herself, and Satya chuckled at her immense curiosity. We'll get to that, little one, but first, let me tell you about the skyfolk spirit who was assigned here to Trinidad and Tobago. His skyfolk name was Ano, and it was short in their language for fool. And my God, what a little fool he was. Ano was new on the job, but he was the first of the skyfolk ever created who had trouble understanding what he was supposed to do. He messed up everything, and I mean everything. When God told him make drizzles, he would make hard rain and flood. When God told him give days of sunshine, well, it was heat wave in retail. Rainbow squealed with laughter until tears burst from her eyes, and even Sindra wiped away a couple of stray tears. And actually, Satya continued as their amusement died down, that was why they assigned him here. He was supposed to be the spirit in charge of the entire Caribbean Sea, but they could not risk him destroying the region or even the world with his ridiculous mistakes. They figured he could train here because there were only 2 seasons to manage. Plus, there weren't too many people compared to other countries in the world, but there was enough of a sample of people from all over the world here to see how they would respond. And boy, did they respond. God never got cursed as many times as he got here. Every time the place flooded, it was a oh God. And every time the sun burned too long, it was another oh God, because there was nothing this Arno could do right. Was it because he was a bad spirit, like a demon? Oh God, what if he was a demon in disguise? What if we have a demon controlling the weather, mommy? Oh God. Sindra cupped her daughter's mouth as more and more muffled utterances of oh God escaped. Satya laughed. No, he was not a bad spirit, and he was certainly no demon. He was just a little challenged when it came to rules and regulations, just like a little girl I know. Rainbow feigned a heart attack and then responded quite seriously and in perfect English. Ano and I are such misunderstood spirits. Both her mother and grandmother stared in shock at her exquisite vocalization, at least until an exclaimed, Check out all your woman now like a cabby, bright like a bulb, just continue na granny, flew out of her mouth. Satya shook her head. So naturally, after almost 100 years of managing our climate, our misunderstood spirit, Ano, Satya winked at an enthusiastically nodding rainbow, got called into heaven for a meeting with higher skyfolk management. These were the skyfolk who relayed the climate instructions from God and carried back reports on the regions. Oh boy, Ano in trouble. Yes, he was in a lot of trouble. See, there was a law that said if after the first 100 years a spirit proved unsuccessful in carrying out his duty, he would be cursed for 50 years and stripped of his power. After that time, if he proved himself worthy, God would reinstate him into his position. Now, there had never been a spirit before him that was remotely unsuccessful, so they had to dig in the ancient scrolls to find out what the consequences of his actions would be if he couldn't improve. You can just imagine the scandal in heaven. Poor Arno felt so embarrassed. He was 1 year away from the end of his first 100 years, and he needed to do everything in his power to prove that he could follow God's explicit instructions. So he headed back down to our islands, determined to be the very best spirit the skyfolk had ever seen. His first 99 years aside, of course. Go, Anno, go, Rainbow chanted. And you know what? He did so well. Our Anno came back here, tucked away his clumsiness, and began his quest. When God said rain, he asked how much, and he gave that much. When God said sun, he asked how bright, and he kept the shine in line. When God said drizzle, Anno gently shook the passing clouds and let the drops lightly fall upon the people. And the people, well, they loved it. They praised God for the dry season that didn't turn to drought and for the rainy season that hadn't turned into floods. It was the most perfect year our islands ever experienced, and the farmers blessed the weather almost every single day until the last week came. Oh no, Rainbow gasped, cupping her mouth. A hurricane had formed in the Atlantic Ocean and was heading our way. Trinidad and Tobago were in its direct path. Category 5, guaranteed destruction. Anno reached out to upper management to ask what on earth, well, heaven was going on. The people were happy and praising God. He had followed every instruction they'd given, and now a massive storm was going to take away all of his hard work. Anno stood up for we. Yes, he did quite bravely, but the instruction didn't change. The hurricane was supposed to come, and Anno was supposed to allow it to hit both of the islands. But why? Why would God ever instruct that? Rainbow wailed crestfallen. Because his ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, little one. Satya spoke reassuringly. Anu was sad, very, very sad. He came back and watched the approaching hurricane from the sky, and he cried for the first time in his life. He cried for our people and what they would have to endure, because just like you, he didn't understand why God would issue such an instruction. As the storm grew closer and closer, Hanno felt more and more depressed. There was nothing he could do but stand back and let it do its work. Satya paused and a rainbow quivered in suspense. Then, in a stroke of what could only be called insanity, Anno had an idea. He knew he couldn't violate the instruction. The storm was to make a direct hit on the two islands, but there had been no instruction on exactly where it should hit. Anno mustered all of his powers just as the hurricane was going to strike exactly where we are in this village, and he pushed it with all of his might until it made a 90-degree turn. Then he let it up and in between the two islands, causing the hurricane's strength to reduce just enough to avoid mass destruction. In a way, the storm had hit both of the islands and neither. Yes, Anno, yes! Rainbow jumped up and down, punching the air with her little fist as she celebrated the brave Anno. Then she paused. But Granny, did he get in trouble? Well, he almost got in trouble, but they couldn't find an exact reason to prosecute him. Hanno was right. He hadn't violated the instruction. He let the storm hit both islands, but he saved most of the people as well as their crops and lands and houses. And boy, did they praise God. They sang his praises from the crack of dawn when the hurricane passed until the wee hours of the night. Churches opened their doors for unscheduled services, and the people danced to the music and lifted their hands to the sky in gratitude for God's grace. But it was Anno, not God, Rainbow said, brows furrowing in rapid range. All things are God, and all glory goes to God, her mother Sindra said softly. But I don't understand, Rainbow protested, tears building in her eyes. Sindra and Seta exchanged silent glances, but this time Rainbow didn't see. Sindra nodded and Satya bent down, placing a hand on Rainbow's shoulder. The sun is setting. Let's go for a walk. We can probably leave a few freshly picked flowers by Grandpa's grave. Rainbow nodded. Visiting her Grandpa Pete was always calming, now that the sadness of his death 3 years ago had passed. She often plucked flowers from the garden for him and spent hours by herself on the tree trunk next to his grave. Sindra could keep an eye on her through the window in Granny's bedroom because it was just behind their yard on a small hill. Maybe when she was alone again, Rainbow could tell him how upset Granny's story had made her. Plus, it was only Grandpa Pete who knew about the crush she had on the most handsome and mischievous boy in her class, Sam. She had a few updates, and Grandpa wasn't telling. As they strolled in the late evening sun towards the mango tree on the hill, Satya observed her downtrodden grandchild. Do you want to know the rest of the story? I promise that by the end you'll understand. Rainbow bowed her head dramatically. If you insist. Satya chuckled, holding one of her hands while Sindra held the other. Well, Anu felt proud of himself for saving the land. He was even more excited to hear the next day that despite his cheeky cleverness, when upper management relayed to God what had happened, God chuckled. So in case you were wondering, God does have a sense of humor. Rainbow was not convinced. When they reached Grandpa Pete's grave, they settled around it, sweeping away the dead leaves with their hands and setting down the flowers they had picked along the way. Comfortable once again, with a remarkable view of the setting sun, Satya continued the story. Ano also got his next instruction, a simple one. Some clouds had lagged behind the storm and they were coming with a bit of rain, so he just had to deal with that and his 100-year test would be complete. Piece of cake. A now masterful Anno squeezed the clouds and allowed just the right amount of rain to come down, exact to the smallest droplets, as though they could sense him at work again. And still filled with gratitude for the passing of the storm, the people streamed out of their houses. They danced and praised in the pouring rain. Their laughter and love filled the air and expanded Anno's heart with more joy than he ever felt before. At least until, na, na, na. Yes, until he realized that the reason the people were dancing and laughing and playing in the rain was because he had forgotten to block out the sun. Rainbow's head whipped around so fast, Sindra shouted, "You're trying to give yourself whiplash, hour." She ignored her mother, excitement brightening on her face once again, much to Satya's satisfaction. Yes, my little rainbow. Anno was the spirit who created what the world calls sun showers. Naturally, it was a clumsy mistake, much aligned with his silly nature, but the heavens were in an uproar. Never before had there been rain and sun at the same time. It was an absolute law among sky folk, handed down by God himself. There were seasons and times for everything under heaven, and somehow Anno had managed to make these two very different things happen all at once. Rainbow couldn't speak. She didn't know how to begin to express the array of emotions and thoughts flooding her. She kept shaking her head in opposition to what she knew this had to mean for Anno's fate. As you have already guessed, Anno failed his 100-year test, but there was a complication. The heavens had never ever recorded this kind of worship and joy and gratitude to God before, not even when the hurricane had safely passed. The people were filled with awe at this wonder of God. Even in rain, there could be sunshine. They were inspired beyond belief. Suddenly, during any bad situation, anything stressful or painful that the people were experiencing, they turned to each other and even within themselves, exclaiming, even in rain, there can be sun, and the sun still shines on rainy days. The hope of the land rose within hours with happiness that would last for generations. It is one of the reasons why our land is known as the happiest place on earth. But what happened to Anno? Rainbow asked softly, her eyes welling up once again. Well, my sweet child, there was nothing that could be done. Anno had broken the skyfolk law, God's law, and for that reason he had to be punished. Anno knew this and accepted his fate as he awaited his heavenly trial. But in an unexpected twist, God decided against letting skyfolk management handle his case. God chose to be Anno's one and only judge. As was the law, he stripped him of his powers for those 50 required years, but instead of cursing Anno, God chose a different path that shocked the heavens. First, he abolished an old law and created a new one, sun showers for the entire world. And second, he placed Anno on earth in our country to serve out his sentence. He said that Anno had proven how much he loved the people and how far he was willing to go to protect them. He felt it only right that Anno got a chance to bond more deeply with them, just as God does with us every day. Rainbow's mouth could not have opened wider. Anno here? In Trinidad? Or he in Tobago? Where Anno now? Well, he's not here anymore. He finished his 50-year sentence a few years ago and returned to the sky where he wheels the weather for the Caribbean Sea. Sometimes still a bit clumsily, like that flood last month. Satya and Sindra both glared up at the sky and then shook their heads, laughing at an invisible Anno. Rainbow raised one eyebrow, doubt creeping over her face. So you saying that I just miss him? Yet somehow you want me to believe this whole Nancy story and that Anno was here in Trinidad, and when I now find that out, he gone? Her mother and grandmother both erupted with laughter, and Sindra said, well, you didn't hear the best part yet. Yes, Satya agreed, subconsciously stroking Grandpa Pete's grave as she gazed into the twilight sky. Remember I told you that his ways are higher than our ways and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts? Rainbow nodded, rolling her eyes. And remember, I told you as well that the sky folk spirit name was Anu. Yes, Granny, Rainbow said, growing impatient. Well, he also had a real name. His birth name was Peter. Sindra and Satya waited for Rainbow to connect the dots. It took her a few seconds before shock crossed her face, and then her eyes narrowed, flying from Sindra to Satya and back again. Now she was convinced they were playing an elaborate trick on her. So all they really take me for a fool then. The two of all they want me to believe that my grandpa Pete was Anno. And with that, Rainbow burst out with laughter so loud and so long that an entire flock of birds that had taken rest in the mango tree flew out in a swarm of unified cackling terror. Oh gosh, girl, you're louder, her mother reprimanded her while Satya shook her head. When Rainbow finally stopped her outburst of hilarity, Satya looked at her with the gravest expression Rainbow had ever seen. This is why Anno, well, Pete, needed to be punished, little one. If he had not done everything exactly as he did, he would have never been sent here. And I wouldn't have met him clumsily walking along the beach when I was just 16. We wouldn't have fallen in love and then had your mother. And do you not realize that if your mother didn't exist and even your worthless father, you wouldn't either? Think about how incredible it is to have Grandpa always looking down on us. Why do you think they say God is a Trinity? Who do you think named you? And who do you think I spoke to today to give a sun shower for my dear little Rainbow so you wouldn't complain all evening? When Sindra shot her mother a glare, Rainbow's face grew agitated. It was a nice little story, Granny, but there is no way under God Yellow Sun that you could get me to believe that Grandpa is Anno with superpowers. Oh no, you think I'm lying? Her granny gave a wicked grin and a mischievous glint came into her eyes. The words she then uttered as she pushed up and strolled away rendered the chatty Rainbow speechless for the first time in her short life. Eh? Well, how you think I know about your little crush on Sam? The end.
Thank you so much for that, Janelle. I think I could speak for everyone in saying that we thoroughly enjoyed your piece. It was definitely fantastic. But I do have two questions for you, though.
Yes.
One is, as a writer, any writer, what inspires you? What's your muse? And also, to what do you hope to accomplish with your work?
Wow, so that's broad. So this was my first little folklore, but as you said, I started off in fantasy. I recently released my first Face It All intimate memoir, which has been probably to date the greatest work of my life. I think anything that involves facing yourself tends to be that greatest work of your life. And then this little story is, I guess, another part of me. For me, what I believe matters the most is ensuring that I am in tune with whatever is coming and allowing myself to be a vessel for it and just not resisting the tugs of my comfort zone, which I think is usually the hardest thing to get past. That's the biggest battle I have because I've never done something like folklore before, for example, nor have I ever had to speak in different voices. And it was a little scary when you guys reached out to say, do you have a story for us? And this for me was the story that I wanted to release at the end of this year. So this is the first time I'm actually sharing it anywhere because I believe that in 2020 for Christmas, for all of this year for us, we need to remember that the sun still shines when there is rain. And that was my Christmas wish, I guess, for our country was that. Inspiration comes from everywhere. I have stories that come from my dreams. I have stories that, well, Anno, for example, came from me staring out my window and there was a sun shower happening. And I just began to develop a narrative within myself as to what if there was a little guy out there who made a mistake one day and allowed the sun to shine while there was still rain. And I wonder if he got into trouble. And then this just began to flow. So it's just staying open, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
No
Really
problem.
appreciate it.
Janelle.
Also, thank you for giving us a sneak peek and allowing us to be the first one to get the inside scoop.
Yes, for sure.
So Janelle, one question. Of course, we do have another LitCon coming up eventually. What should we expect to hear from you in the future? What can we expect to get from you? You have
So
so much talent and so much to see. So we're always expecting to hear something from you. What should we expect from you?
yes, I think that so the Aristot trilogy, which was my first ever work in fantasy. Fantasy has long been my favorite genre, fantasy and sci-fi. I love the limitlessness of it and the fact that it allows the imagination to run wild and free. My fantasy is based in an entirely different world, but there are a few that I'm working on now that are earth-based fantastical books. Um, and this has been interesting for me. So one is far off into the future, for example, in a very desolate version of Earth. Another one is in our modern day Earth, yet it's with a realm that exists within our Earth itself, that is unknown. And it's interesting to weave through that. I hope that by the next LitCon, that I will be able to share a little bit about how my writing process has evolved. Because even in writing my memoir this year, it was a lot different than writing the trilogy, mostly because I stopped coming down so hard on myself to hit every potential deadline that was there. And I just let myself enjoy the process of writing. And that's something that has taken me a little while to do, because it can be very nerve wracking to want to perfect every little thing and know that perfection is not possible. You can progress, you can improve, you can work diligently over and over again to make sure your craft gets better and that you grow as a person. But perfect is not necessarily for this realm. So accepting that and then allowing myself to enjoy it has been, I think, something I would love to carry back into my fiction writing and see if it works there as well. And hopefully talk to you all about if I was successful at that next year.
Well, definitely, Janelle, we are certain that you will be successful. The talent that you have shown, you've been the highlight of our LitCon, and you are the highlight again tonight. So I want to say thank you very much from all of us. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We were very, very happy to have you, and we hope to see you again in the future.
For sure.
So before I continue today, I want to actually acknowledge Mr. Ganchan Raymond, who was also one of the readers for our LitCon open house. So Mr. Raymond, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us from St. Lucia. And as we progress this afternoon with some cultural items, we're going to start off with a song by Elisa Espinoza, who is currently a Form 6 student of Holy Faith Convent Pinal. Elisa has quite a big voice for a very little person, and she has performed across the country and in the Caribbean as well. So I'll now hand you over to Elisa Espinoza.
Once upon a long night, after a hard cry, somewhere in Bethlehem, a baby breaks the silence, sweet babies crying. I am Emmanuel. Then angels gave the music, shepherds gave reverence, and a message to the land, a word of love and cherished, the God who became a
And that was Elisa Espinoza, a student at Holy Faith Convent, Pinal. As we move along, our next item will be performed by Miss Paula Obi. Paula Obi is a performance poet, photographer, and publisher. She has been performing for over 30 years and has graced stages in Canada, New York, Barbados, Guyana, Venezuela, and her home country, Trinidad and Tobago. She has written 3 poetry collections and produced 2 poetry CDs. She has also published internationally, regionally, and locally. Obe currently runs a small publishing house called Bamboo Talk Press. She also has an awesome selection of merchandise, which is seen on her Instagram page. I'd now like to welcome Miss Paula Obi.
Hi, I'm Paula Obi. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Despite the 2020 that we experienced, I'm gonna do 2 pieces tonight. One piece is called Mask, another piece is called Afterbirth. And Mask is kind of like my signature piece. So this is Mask. Imagine me a poet, not being able to say how much I miss you. So I'm coming straight, I'm not going to hide in masking metaphors. I'm not going to couch my emotions in images of your dawn and the softness of your night. Imagine me a poet, not being able to say how much I love you well, or maybe it's because I know you can't feel the same. And I wasn't looking for forevers until you cracked my mask. Imagine me so detached, falling for you, seeing down to your soul and wanting to touch what lies so deep. Imagine me so detached, wishing you'd be the one to fill the empty faces of my dreams. And I wasn't looking for forevers or tomorrows. You know, my heart is filled with what yesterday meant. And since wishes seldom ever come true, my mask is back on again. Imagine me so detached, falling for you. Hi, this next piece I'm gonna do is a piece entitled Afterbirth, and Afterbirth is one of those strong woman poems, and it was written from my mom and my late granny. Yeah, okay, so this is Afterbirth. The past fails. My memory is stretching the doors of my mothers that went before to my mother and grandmother whose sight still stretches on. They remember when little girls were expected to be seen and not heard, to give of themselves without expecting too much in return, to burn in the words of the holy books of Quran, the Gita, the Holy Bible, for walking 50 years forward. The past fails. house. My eyes a dose of depressant, and there are still unsanctioned words to girls choosing mechanics over homework, choosing careers over marriage. It has always been strong when they're wrong, strong, proud of beliefs of who they were, who they are, who they will be. And I tell you, a lot has changed. You know, and still nothing has changed. And in the midst of it all, you know, I remember this poem is supposed to be on social progress. But social progress can't happen without strong women. In the midst of it all, I remember this poem is supposed to be on social progress of workshops and conferences of sardine, packed cars driving out to women to learn and teach, sharing and bearing ideologies that sometimes escapes with the afterword. We once again claims to bring forth daughters not necessarily our own. But a lot has changed, and still nothing. Still nothing has changed. And there's always been strong women around, strong, proud of beliefs of who they were, who they are, who they will be. And I tell you, a lot has changed, and still nothing. Still nothing has. Still nothing has changed. And I think you know what I mean. Thank you.
So thank you very much. That just now was Miss Paula Obi, and we really appreciate being able to insert a piece like this, especially because it's not just personal but also very relevant to what is going on today and within our own society here in Trinidad and Tobago, where we see women are constantly victims of terrible crimes, and like she said, it's still nothing has changed. But hopefully one day working together, we'll be able to change what is going on right now. But moving right ahead, we're going to go to another student of the Holy Faith Convent Penal, Form 5 pupil, Miss Mary Lee Crackshank. She's going to say a monologue first. So Mary Lee, the floor is yours.
Let me tell you a tale that happened in Trinidad. This small little tale happened in the year 2020. So you know this tale could relate to you and to me. It was the night before Christmas. Everyone was asleep. Everyone was happy. And the cake, they just finished getting baked. Auntie Mildred went to bed. Uncle Cousin, he was happy. But you know, Uncle Freddie, he just was real happy. So Uncle Freddie got up. It was about 11:45. He decided to have a little flask from Uncle Scooter and then. So as he got up and he hurried to the kitchen, he decided why not take a little piece of the chicken. So Uncle Freddie went to it, but then he heard a noise. He wanted to know what was this. Could it be coal or the galvanized that coal? So as he went to check, he saw something so astonishing. Uncle Freddie saw a man in a big red suit. So as he went, Uncle Freddie got scared. Was this a burglar? A thief? Oh Lord, this man raced with me. But then the man turned around and he saw a plain bleach white beard. Merry Christmas to all, and to all good children. Santa Claus in Trinidad, Uncle Freddie was perplexed. This man had on a suit. Uncle Freddie said he was going to get a kid's joke. But no, he was saying flash. So Uncle Freddie questioned the man. Said, Santa Claus, where's your mask? You're in sanitized, but you want to tell me Happy Christmas? Uncle Freddie got vexed. He said you're going to endanger all of us. make sure you wash your hands and make sure to keep at least 6 feet apart. He said, Santa, if you quarantine for 14 days, you wash your hands, you bring sanitizer, you even wash your face. Santa said no. I just rushed along the way. I came from Africa, Milwaukee, and all these other places. Uncle Freddie said no, coronavirus is a thing. So how you want to spread all these germs to all these children about and even the underprivileged? Santa said I did not think of that. I just wanted to bring good cheer. So Uncle Freddie told him of all the clauses for coronavirus this Christmas up in here. He spoke of Dr. Rowley and all the coronavirus rules. He made sure to let him know that this year, that was not the case for Trinidad and Tobago. Santa said, I know, and he had an August period class. This year in Trinidad, we're not having none of that. Santa went along Italy, and he took a bottle of hand sanitizer and a red mask just so he couldn't spread corona. He quarantined for 14 days, and later on, Uncle Freddie got a call. To my good friend Freddie, thank you. I did not spread coronavirus to anyone in the bush, but you know, it came at a cost. Africa never got their gifts. Europe is still waiting, because Santa said he's quarantined for 14 days. So, ladies and gentlemen, wash your hands, because Santa might be quarantined for 14 days. So we might get gifts now.
And that was another performer from Holy Faith Convent Penal, Miss Mary Lee Cruikshank. As we progress with our program this evening, it is indeed my pleasure to introduce our youngest and most adorable presenter this evening. Her name is Charlotte Gregorio. She is 11 years old and she attends St. Xavier's Private School. So Charlotte's going to read a story for us this evening. So Charlotte, the floor is yours, darling. You can start when you are ready.
Thank you. Okay. Setting the table for my family's annual Christmas lunch, many familiar dishes seem to be missing from the dining table. Confused, my mother explained to me that because of the low income that our family had received this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic and job loss, they decided that our budget for non-essentials would be reduced. Nonetheless, I still eyed that glazed, smoky ham that was enrobed with pineapple slices and topped with decorative cherries. The food's tempting aroma engulfed the entire dining room, creating a sudden urge of hunger to anyone that passed it. Moments after preparing for lunch, the doorbell that was positioned to the front of my grandparents' house rang repeatedly. We assumed they were carolers eagerly awaiting to belt out Yuletide tunes. Instead of flashing crimson cloaks that held promising singers, my aunt and her two sons stood impatiently at the gate. Embracing their presence, I elbow bumped my cousins to greet them in accordance with our new social patterns, the COVID-19 guidelines. As I escorted them up the winding, narrow staircase, we were later greeted by my grandfather, who was standing, hands outstretched, with a full, transparent bottle of hand sanitizer. After passing our already dry hands with hand sanitizer, we seemed to be summoned to the kingly feast in front of us. All 10 of us family members sat in an organized manner of a 6-foot distance. The feeling was eerie, together with loved ones, but physically too far to even pass the sorrow across the table. Finally, however, we could eat like majesties and indulge into the festive feast. While waiting to chomp on our tasty delights, I thought that the scene resembled the quiet mood of a war zone before the exchange of gunfire. The only noise that disturbed the silence was the greedy chewing of my cousins, who just could not hold back. As I flipped my long, auburn-shaded hair back, everyone knew that I was about to devour my own seasonal favorites. We had finished our meals and were pestered by my grandparents to wear our masks once more. After some time had elapsed, my cousins and I begged permission to scamper about the yard. hesitant at first, my grandmother contemplated on the game of tag as an unreasonable request. She decided that we could only play in the yard on the basis of maintaining social distancing. Agreeing, we darted out of the front door, romping like wild horses. Our feet were nurtured by the soft and vast greenery, as my violet, flower-printed dress danced along the fluid zephyrs of breeze. Running, jumping, and tumbling outdoors seemed too familiar, but yet vague. It had been far too long, causing me to remember the COVID 19 3 days before March the 16th. I was quickly snapped out of my daze as my cousin's sudden thump to the ground jolted me. Rushing to his side, my grandmother's words rang through my head, but this was not to be applied in this terrible situation. Wake up! I beckoned as his limp body sunk into the grass. There, my cousin's eyes slowly shut, with only a sliver of his white eyeball showing. His mask covered the majority of face, causing me only to see half of it. My family members were soon to follow, as a sharp scream that I produced could not be ignored. Social distancing was far from our minds as terror seized the afternoon. My trembling aunt placed cold packs on my cousin and applied an inhaler to his mouth. Thankfully, we all watched him being revived. 10 minutes had soon washed by, and the cause of his fainting was certain. The excessive active play, coupled with his unbreathable cloth mask, made it as difficult for him to access oxygen, which was worsened by his asthmatic history. Luckily, his parents were able to revive him with the inhaler, and happiness once returned to Alice Street. The children were made quietly to play board games afterwards, but grandmother was unrelentingly the children needed to play quietly board games afterwards, but Grandma was unrelenting with her mask protocol, even though Cousin Jim nearly took his last breath. COVID 19, you see, was a virus like no other. And she was insistent that we were to take every precaution. Personally, I think many things from our Christmas 2020, especially that everything should be done in moderation. Stay safe this Christmas by following COVID 19 guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. And I completely agree with Suan. You are the most adorable presenter here today. But could you tell me what you want for Christmas?
I want a puppy.
That is a fantastic gift. I love dogs and I really hope you do get a puppy.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move right ahead to our next presenter. We have a Shanice Bihari. She's actually a classmate of mine. She is an exuberant and driven budding literary writer and an English language and literature teacher. Her personal motto is "In spite of, you can." This personal phrase means that despite a person's experience, with much tenacity, achieving their goal is possible. To her, giving up is never an option. Education and being an educator is a passion of hers, as she believes every person has the mental and creative capacity to pursue any course of study which they could use to positively impact their society. Shanice, the floor is yours.
Good night, everyone. So, I will be reading a short story. Unlike everyone else, it's not about COVID, but it's a creative short story by Dylan Thomas, and the name of it is A Child's Christmas in Wales. And so, it was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden waiting for Cats with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December in my memory is white as Lapland, although there were no reindeers, but there were cats, patient, cold, and callous. Our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars and horrible whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would slide and sidle over the white back garden walls. And the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur-capped and moccasin trappers from the Hudson Bay off Mumbles Road, would hurl our deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes. The wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen, in the muffling silence of the eternal snows, eternal, ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden. Or if we heard it at all, it was to us like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But soon the voice grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Prothero, and she beat the dinner gong. And we ran down the garden with the snowballs in our arms towards the house, and smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombulating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like a town crier in Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in Wales, standing on the wall in a row. We bounded into the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped at the door of the smoke-filled room. Something was burning all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero, who always slept after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But he was standing in the middle of the room saying, "A fine Christmas," and smacking the smoke with a slipper. "Call the fire brigade," cried Mrs. Prothero as she was beating the gong. "They won't be here," said Mr. Prothero. "It's Christmas." There was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, and Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them, waving his slipper as though he were conducting. "Do something," he said. We all threw our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero and ran out the house to the telephone box. "Let's call the police as well," Jim said, "and the ambulance, and Ernie Jenkins. He likes fires." But we only called the fire brigade. And soon the fire engine came, and three tall men in helmets brought in a hose into the house, and Mr. Prothero got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And even when the firemen turned off the hose and were standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them. She said the right thing always. She looked at the three tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Would you like anything to read?" Years and years ago, when I was a boy, there were wolves in Wales, and birds the color of the red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills. When we sang wallowed all night and day in the caves that smelt like Sunday afternoons in damp front house parlors, and we chased with the jawbones of deacons the English and the bears before the motor car, before the wheel, before the Duchess-faced horse, when we rode the daft and happy hills barebacked. It snowed and it snowed. But here, a small boy says, "It snowed last year too. I made a snowman and my brother knocked it down. And I knocked my brother down, and then we had tea." But that was not the same snow, I see. Our snow was not only shaken from the whitewash buckets down the sky, it came shoaling out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. The snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses like a puree and grandfather moss. Minutely ivied the walls and settled the postman, opening the gate like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white torn Christmas cards. Were there postmen then too? With sprinkling eyes and wide cherried nose. On the spread frozen feet, they crunched up to the doors and waited on them manfully. But all the children could hear was the ringing of bells. You mean the postman went rat-a-tat-tat, the doors rang? I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside them. I only could hear thunder sometimes, never bells. There were church bells too, inside them. No. In the bat-black, snow-white belfries, tugged by bishops on stalks, and they rang their tidings over the bandaged town, over the frozen foam, over the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. It seemed that all the churches boomed for joy under my window, and the weathercocks crew for Christmas on our fence. Get back to the postman. Ours had a black knocker, and then they stood on white welcome mat in the little drifted porches and huffed and puffed, making ghosts with their breath, and jogged from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out. And then the presents, and then the presents after the Christmas box. And the cold postman with a rose on his button nose tingled down the tea tree, slithered run of the chilly glinting hill. He went in his ice-bound boots like a man on fishmonger's slabs. He wagged his bag like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned the corner on one foot, and by God he was gone. Get back to the presents. There were the useful presents, engulfing mufflers of the old coach days, the mitten maids of giant sloths, zebra scarves of a substance like silky gum that could be the tug of war down the galoshes, blinding tam of chanters like patchwork tea coziers, bunny-suited busbies, balaclavas for victims, and head-shrinking tribes. From ants who always wore wool next to the skin, they were mustached and rasping vests that made you wonder why the ants had any skin left on at all. And once I had a little crocheted nose bag from an ant now, alas, no longer whinnying with us. And pictureless books in which small boys, though warned with quotations not to, would skate on. Farmer Glyde's pond and drowned the books that told me everything about the wasp, except why. Go on to the useless presents. Bags of moist and many-colored jelly babies, and folded flag and false noseman and tram conductors, caps and machine that punched tickets and rang a bell, never catapult, once by a mistake that no one could explain. A little hatchet and celluloid duck that made when you pressed it a most unduck-like sound, a mewing moo that an ambitious cat might now who wish to be a cow, and painting a book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sea, and the animals any color I please. And still the dazzling sky blue sheep are grazing in the red fields under the rainbow, bills and pea green birds. Were there uncles in our house? There are always uncles at Christmas, the same uncles, and on Christmas mornings with dog disturbing whistle and sugar fags, I would scour and waft down for the news and the little world and find always a dead bird by the post office on the white deserted swings, perhaps on a robin. All but one of his fires out. Men and women wading, scooping back from the chapel with taproom noses and wind-bust cheeks, with all albinos huddled, their stiff black jarring feathers against the irreligious snow. Mistletoe hung from the gas brackets in all the front parlors. There was cherry and walnuts and bottled beer and crackers and dessert spoons, and cats in their fur about watched the fires and heaped fire spat, all ready for the chestnuts and mulling pokers. Some few large men sat in the front parlors without their collars, uncles almost certainly trying their new cigars, holding them out judiciously at arm's length, returning to their mouths, coughing, then holding them out as though waiting for the explosion. And some few small aunts, not wanted in the kitchen nor anywhere else for that matter, sat on the very edges of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break like faded cups and saucers. Not many those moments trod the piling streets. An old man always fawn, bouldered, yellow-gloved, and at this time of year, with spots of snow that would take his constitutional to the white bowling green and back, as he would take it wet or fire on Christmas Day or Doomsday, sometimes two hale young men with big pipes blazing on overcoats and wind-blown scarves would trudge unspeaking down the forlorn sea, to work up an appetite to blow away the fumes, who knows, to walk into the waves until nothing of them was left but the two curling smoke clouds of their inextinguishable briars. Then I would be slap dashing home The gravy smell of dinners of others, the bird smell, the brandy, the pudding, and the mince coiling up to my nostrils. Went out a snow-clogged slide lane, would come a boy, the spit of myself, the pink-tipped cigarette, and the violet past of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, leering all to himself. I hated him on sight and sound, and would be about to put my dog whistle tip of my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas when suddenly he went a violet wink when his whistle, his lips, and blew stridently so high, so exquisitely loud, that gobbling faces, their cheeks bulged with goose, would press against their tinseled windows the whole length of wide, white echoing streets. For dinner, we had turkey and the blazing pudding, and after dinner, the uncles sat in front of the fire, loosened all their buttons, put their large moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little, and slept. Mothers, aunts, sisters scuttled to and fro, bearing turreens. Aunt Bessie, who had already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered at the sideboard and had some elderberry wine. The dog was sick. Auntie Dozy had to have 3 aspirins, but Auntie Hannah, who liked port, stood in the middle of the snowboard backyard singing like a big bosom thrush. I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up to. And then, when they burst, which all did, the uncles jumped and rumbled in the rich and heavy afternoon. The uncles breathing like dolphins and snow descending. I would sit among the festoons and Chinese lanterns and nibble dates and try to make a model man o' war following the instructions of little engineers and produce what might be mistaken for a seagoing tram car. Or I would go out, my bright new boots squeaking into the white world on the seaward hill to call on Jim, Dan, Jack, and pad through the streets, leaving the huge, deep footprints on the hidden pavements. I bet people will think they have been hippos. What would you do if you saw a hippo coming down our street? I'd go like this, bang, and I'll throw him over the railings and roll him into down the hill, and then I'll tickle him under the air and he'd wag his tail. What would you do if you saw 2 hippos? Iron flanked and bellowing he hippos clanked and battered through the scudding snow towards as we passed Mr. Daniel's house. Let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball through his letterbox. Let's write things in the snow. Let's write, Mr. Daniel looks like a spaniel all over his lawn. Or we walked on the white shore. Can the fishes see it snowing? The silent one, clouded heavens, drifted onto the sea. Now we were snow-blind travelers lost on the north hills, and vast dewlap dogs, with flasks round their necks, ambled and shambled up to us. Baying Excelsior, we returned home through the poor streets where only a few children fumbled with bare red fingers in the wheel-rotted snow that cat-called us, their voices fading away as we trudged uphill into the cries of the duck birds and the hooting of ships out into the whirling bay. And then at tea, recovered uncles would be jolly, and ice cakes loomed in the center of the table like a marble grave. Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum because it was only once a year. Bring out the tall tales now that we told by fire as the gaslight bubbles like a diver. Ghosts wooed like owls in the long nights when I dared not to look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubbyhole under the stairs where the gas meter ticked. And I remembered that when we went singing carols once, when there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets, at the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house, and we stumbled upon the darkness of the drive that night, each one of us afraid, each one holding a stone in one hand in case, and all of us too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old unpleasant and maybe web-foot men weaving in caves. We reached the black bulk of the house. What shall we give them? Hark the herald? No, Jack said. Good King Winkles, I'll count 3. 1, 2, 3. And we began to sing our voices high and seemingly distant. The snow felted darkness round the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door and sang. Then a small, dry voice, like the voice of someone who has not spoken for a long time, joined our singing. A small, dry eggshell from the other side of the door, a small, dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside our house. The front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle, gulping gas. Everything was good again and shone over the town. Perhaps it was a ghost, Jim said. Perhaps it was trolls, Dan said, who was always reading. Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left, Jack said, and we did that. Always on Christmas night, there was music. An uncle played the fiddle, a cousin sang Cherry Ripe, and another uncle sang Drake's drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who had got on the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death. And then in another, she said her heart was like a bird's nest, and then everybody laughed again. And then I went to bed, looking through my bedroom window out into the moonlight at the unending smoke-colored snow. I could see the lights in the windows of all the other houses on our hill, and hear the music rising up from them, the long, steadily falling night. I turned the gas down, I got into bed, and I said some words to close and holy darkness, and then I slept. The end.
Thank you very much, Shindiz, for that wonderful story. As we move along, let's welcome our next presenter. Dr. Vijay Maraj is a lecturer in the Department of Literary, Cultural, and Communication Studies at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. In the course of filling this role over the past 2 decades, plus she has developed expertise in one field, literacy, which includes the subcategories of cultural and technological literacy, but more importantly, encompasses the traditional literacies of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Her publications and presentations try to exemplify the significance of this. She's here today to present a story entitled No Favors. Dr. Maraj.
How are you? Yeah. Yeah. Hey. I love it. Give me the work with the work. Yeah. Give me the work with the work now. Give me the work with the work now. Now I come for this work. Sign me up. I come for this work. Sign me up. I come for this work. Sign me up. I come for it. Boss lady, I come for this work. Sign me up. I come for this work. Sign me up. I come for this work. And I go work it properly. I wanna sign my signature, cross my T's, cause I have all.
Christmas is always a bad time for me, Radha, Gaylan said, in tones of sadness and resignation that have become signatures of her communication now. I know that. I know you too long to not know that. But don't worry now. All rope have an end. And in this COVID time, we might see the end a short man want to. Gaylan shook her head. She didn't agree with all this rope nonsense. She shook her head again. Use your head, Narada. Anything affect tall boy in these so-called hard times? I'm sorry to tell you that is where you wrong as far as short man concerned. For me, nothing will change this Christmas except, God forbid, that short man keep on not wearing no mask and he bring the virus home. In which case, I will dead as I live, alone and abandoned by this man that I love more than my own life. I don't know how to explain it, but like people building more and decorating more than ever this year. And because of how he is, short man have more than he fair share as usual. And since them fellas never learn how to share and what it mean to work together, well, short man will score more than most. That means I will get more than what I want or need and not get what is truly my right. Short man love and he time. As though to underscore the points that Gaylan was making, in the background, the track started up with the familiar dudum rhythm on which guesses oi stretched briefly before launching into where do you walk, give me the walk, give me the walk. This is followed, of course, by Kess's unique ability to capture the quasi-aggressive tone of craftsmen and day laborers in these island spaces. A comfort walk, sign me up. A comfort walk, sign me up. A comfort. All the women in this neighborhood respected, supported, and often mimicked the tone. They were often, however, less supportive of their men's relationship with some of the people with whom that tone was necessary. Kess's next scream announced her and the promises their men made to her. Boss lady, and I go walk it properly. I often think that this is one of the best illustrations of class differences on the island, but I'm not sure how to talk about such things, how to best say what I'm trying to say. But I don't suppose that lack matter, I feel, because I'm just trying to give the story to you here as I find it. The song may have well inspired the conversation between because Shortman looked a lot like Kess, and his ability to move and talk in the same tones as Kess's songs made him most popular with boss ladies across the country. I mean, quite often when I have heard him talking on the phone to his boss ladies, I have in fact heard him begin with hello, hello, hello in the exact notes Kess uses in this song. Radha didn't have to deal with that kind of thing because Tallboy was more like Farmer Nappy, and his easygoing ways fitted backyard jam rather than any of the smooth romantic things that Kess does bring. You could say then that the songs in the background of the women's conversation underscored the nodes on which their lives teetered uneasily and unevenly. Radha had gotten a certificate in geriatric nursing when the government started supporting home healthcare systems and training for interested persons. Her life had become richer because of it, but Gaylan couldn't do courses or go outside of their home and neighborhood for too long. She had her daily round of chores associated with Shortman's sideline chicken farming, and her entire life consisted of doing what she thought best for Shortman, a task in which Shortman participated wholeheartedly. Gaylan even helped Radha to have a richer life by keeping the children while Radha was at work. The women in the neighborhood often supported each other in this way. Today, Radha was just trying to prop up Gaylan through another hard Christmas. The problem was always the rope that she hoped would end for Shortman. It had the three familiar elements, wine, women, and song, except that for Shortman, the wine part included specific amounts of Hennessy to spike the effects of the hard local that he smoked. Barring Gaylan, his women were all boss ladies, and his song was year-long, from the parang of Christmas through the subsequent year-round soca jam. I have seen the rope in action, and it is a frighteningly difficult, beautiful, golden thing to behold. Shortman's tightly muscled body, his inward curving six-pack, and his slightly rounded lower belly, which he takes every opportunity to allow his boss ladies to see, is offset by a boyishly sweet face with shockingly bold, lidded eyes. The lidded look has a biological chemical explanation, of course, a combination of weed and eye drops that distended the bloodshot veins. But nobody looking at him ever thought of that, neither man nor woman, who both fell hard in equal measure for the angel they thought they beheld. Indeed, as though weed is really God's gift to mankind, the look is accepted as part of the cool which pervades his stance, his smell, and the soft, peaceful, musical voice with which he speaks. All of that would have been fine if it were a distant academic matter, but in reality, the entire package seemed to draw often dangerous levels of attention as easily as honey draws insects. He once told me that had been a problem for him since he was 14, maybe even before, and it keeps growing out of control now at 40. Indeed, he likes to recount the story of his 14-year-old surprise. It happened when a bride who got married into his neighborhood chose him to dance with and kissed him on her wedding night. A week later, she accosted him, brought him inside her house, and took his virginity. Because such a custom continued unabated over the years, Shortman began to use it to his advantage. If women want me, who am I to protest? He would chortle. Gaylan had other ideas about the whole thing, but nobody took her on. This is a pity, it seems to me, because I think she's right. She lamented repeatedly. This outrageous behavior is nothing but a result of these fellas' stupidity. If they would only work together, they could beat the boss system instead of fighting up to be the new boss in town like that asshole Redman. She knew of what she spoke, of course. Nobody is the boss of me seemed to be her motto as she went about her daily chicken-minding routines. So that even those who get a laugh at her for sticking to Shortman like glue kept their mouths shut and their noses out of her business. They had heard her on the point of organizing often enough to know that she must have her own reasons to stick to him. And those who understood knew only too well that sometimes a man or a woman is not the boss of their own heart. And don't they say that what God had joined together, let no man put asunder? Who would dare be the judge of such things? On the point of organizing for progress, though, she was a good judge, and the thing she reserved her harshest judgment for was the principle of no favors, on which the immense crew of laborers that comprised the neighborhood functioned. She couldn't work out the facets of the no favors resistance position that she found everywhere, although every single class of worker repeated it. The plumber said, "The boss lady can't think that she's doing me no favors by giving me this job." But he or she would say the same thing about the contractor who might have given him the end to do the plumbing for a larger job on which he was working. Every single skill group fought the other to be the main contractor on a given job, and everyone adopted the same position towards the person finally selected as the main party, as well as the person giving the contract in the first place. How many times had she not heard Shortman say, "They ain't doing me no favors by giving me this job yet"? And so it went on, across and down through the various ranks and classes. Most people pitied her because they thought she was a sad woman whose husband cheated on her. But Galen watched on as Shortman almost became a gigolo time and time in order to be the main contractor for the various jobs he sought and kept. He would then bring home the spoils of his victory to her, and she would accept them with love and gratitude in spite of the laughter. So convinced was she that it was the no favors philosophy that undermined them all and made of Shortman the person he had become. COVID, tsunami, hurricane and storms, it was always same old for people like her and her man in this paradise in the Caribbean. Christmas or no Christmas. The end.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raj. Always a pleasure to have you presenting all of our conferences. We're moving right ahead to Darren Sandy. He has established an open mic in 2010 called My Microphone and a theatre group in 2011 called I Am Christian Theatre. Sandy has also collaborated with performance poet Idris Salim to curate the performance series Borderlines. Borderlines is an annual live showcase supported by a video series and workshops designed to stretch the imagination for the portrayal of spoken word poetry. So next we have Darren Sandy.
Coughing and counting down, time for the panic. When Mary Regina closed down, things did get drastic from China to Trinidad, wrapped up with care. Pandemonium when COVID came here. Press conferences, short tempers, ministers versus media, doctors with facts versus journalists on Wikipedia.
And Rashi, not to discount your Google search.
The first fatality put people in a scare, so it's rush for toilet paper and Lysol shelves bare. The Prime Minister's dress code was aligned with premonition. First mass didn't help, but now mass is jurisdiction. Church members still meeting, saying God will save them, while police asking God, what really take them? No more school. Lock down everyone on the inside. A suggestion of a dome was some people's best insight. Lovers of doubles and KFC almost forced to choose. That was the greatest dilemma for a few. Borders shut tight. People on the outside. If you know the right people, no worries you could come by. Popular phrases. Sign in. My connection drop off. While bosses in meetings in jackets and drawers. This Christmas we sharing the gifts with a difference. Parangin is a drive-by, pelt the pastel from a distance. I want me brush. Have to sanitize the brush his neighbor has. His ears now that brush passing from hand to hand. Social media is the new stage for artists to thrive, while patrons taking free shows, paying with views on the live. So our accounts remain barren. and artists are suffering. But Marshall says no else is only lessons. But what lesson can we find under the 2023? Can we reverse the months and revoke the COVID-19? Or we can wait on the vaccine and jump this hurdle? Once the side effects don't turn you into a Ninja Turtle. So dash out the bad vibes, prance and zest on the inside. Put Vicks in your coffin, come let us stay from the outside. Let Cupid meet you in the solid sipping sorrel and ginger beer. It's just a few days till we done the year. So we shall blitz them come 2021. For we must stand up, ask Stuart Young. We will Rudolph our way out of this year's conundrum. COVID taught it kick us, but it is a great help. We shall live abundantly once God grants us that breath.
And thank you very much. We had, of course, the man, the legend, Mr. Darren Sandy, who never ceases to amaze us with his spoken word. He's always on point, always relevant, and ever the performer. So thanks again, Darren. We can never replace you in the field of spoken word. Our next cultural item is a song by a student of Holy Faith Convent Pinal. Her name is Akelia Jones. She is in Form 6 and she will be entertaining us. This is our last cultural item for the evening. So take it away, Akelia.
The stars of light we shine with His wisdom light, of all things greatest good. Lonely world, in sin and error parted to be given, and the soul felt its
And that is talent again from Holy Faith Convent, Pinal. So I'd now like to hand you over to Danielle to lead us into our next item.
Yes, so our final item for the night is going to be a condensed Trini version of "Twas the Night Before Christmas." It is an original composition by myself, and Swan and I will be singing it for you tonight. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even those annoying white lizards. The stockings were hung by the burglar proofing with care, in hopes that Soca Santa would soon be there. The children were nestled or snug in their beds, with visions of tambour ball danced in their heads. And Mama in her nightgown and I in my nightie had just settled down for a long hot nap under the Lasco fan.
When out on the side of the road there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open my mother's freshly hung curtains and threw up the sash. He was dressed in his sneakers and jersey and jeans, a bundle of toys he had flung on his back. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like sorrel, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white and fake as the snow.
He sprang to his teeter, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like down with a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night."
So thank you very much, Danielle. That was her original composition. And Danielle, I do hope that we will see more of this writing in the future.
Of course we will.
Thank you. It is my privilege at this point to propose a vote of thanks for this occasion. Our chair, Dr. Vijay Maraj, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Trinidad and Tobago Literature Conference Secretariat and other supporting organizations such as the University of the West Indies and the Ministry of Education, I extend a hearty vote of thanks to all participants for showcasing their work in the form of literary pieces or spoken words at our inaugural open house. We are grateful to all presenters who have highlighted the immense talent that exists within Trinidad and Tobago. I wish to express my gratitude to the members of the Conference Secretariat, Dr. Vijay Maraj, Divya Sukhdev, and Danielle Skinner, without whom this open house would not have been such an impressive event. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to record our enthusiastic thanks to Mr. Roger McFarlane for the logistic support and guidance extended to all of us at this open house. Please follow us on Instagram at TT Literature 2020 and on Facebook under the handle Books as Companions and Friends. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Happy holidays and God bless. Good night.